Back to School of Horror. Welcome back to another chilling episode. Today we dive into 3 creepy true student horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. These stories come straight from the hallowed halls of colleges and universities, where the pursuit of knowledge collides with the unknown. Places where stress runs high, sleep runs low, and sometimes, the line between reality and nightmare blurs. So, lock your doors, turn off the lights, and get ready to explore the dark side of student life. It started subtly. A creaking door, a cold spot in the middle of the room, shadows flickering at the edge of vision. Our first story comes from Sarah, a freshman at a prestigious university, excited to start her new life. She quickly realized her dorm room held a dark history. Sleep became a distant memory. Every time she closed her eyes, the whispers started. Faint at first, like the rustling of papers, but they grew louder, more insistent. One night she woke with a jolt, heart pounding in her chest. The whispers were gone, replaced by a bone-chilling cold and the distinct feeling of being watched. Her eyes darted to her desk, the one antique her grandmother had insisted she take. The drawer was open. Inside, nestled among her textbooks, was a small, tarnished locket. She'd never seen it before in her life. As she reached for it, the room plunged into an unnatural cold. Her hand trembled, pulling back from the locket as if it burned. The next day, Sarah tried to ignore the growing unease that clung to her. But that night, the activity escalated. Books flew off her shelf, crashing to the floor with a deafening boom. The antique desk rattled violently, its drawer slamming open and shut. Terror choked her. She scrambled back, pressing herself against the wall, the freezing cold seeping into her very bones. Then, as quickly as it began, it stopped. Silence. Except for the faint ticking of the clock, the room was still. Our next story takes us deep into the stacks of the university library, a place where silence reigns and the weight of knowledge hangs heavy in the air. John, a history major known for his late-night study sessions, found himself alone among the towering bookshelves. He was engrossed in a particularly fascinating text about ancient civilizations when he first sensed it, a presence, cold and unseen, lurking nearby. He dismissed it as fatigue, pushing himself deeper into his studies. But as the hours crawled by, the presence grew stronger, more insistent. He felt a chill creep up his spine, the hairs on the back of his neck prickling with unease. He looked up, his gaze scanning the dimly lit aisles between the bookshelves. Nothing. He returned to his book, trying to ignore the growing sense of dread that pooled in his stomach. Suddenly, a book on the shelf above him shot out, as if propelled by an unseen hand, crashing onto the table in front of him. John jumped, his heart pounding in his chest. He whirled around, searching for the source of the disturbance. And that's when he saw her. A figure, translucent and shimmering, stood at the end of the aisle. It was the figure of a young woman, her long hair cascading down her back, her eyes fixed on him with a sorrowful intensity. He froze, every instinct screaming at him to run. The figure glided closer, her form flickering like a candle flame in the draft. As she approached, John could make out the details of her clothing, a long, flowing dress that seemed out of place among the modern surroundings. He stumbled back, his heart threatening to burst out of his chest. He wanted to scream, to call out for help, but his voice caught in his throat. The figure stopped a few feet away, her sorrowful gaze never leaving his. John found his voice, a raspy whisper escaping his lips. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice trembling. The figure remained silent, her eyes boring into his. Then she slowly raised her hand, pointing towards a specific section of the library. And then, just as quickly as she had appeared, she was gone. John sat there for what felt like hours, his heart still racing. He knew he should leave, to get out of the library and never return. But curiosity, or perhaps a morbid fascination, drew him towards the section the ghostly figure had pointed to. He walked slowly, each step echoing in the silence of the library. He reached the indicated section, local history. His eyes scanned the shelves, stopping on a book with a faded cover. He pulled it out, his fingers brushing against the worn leather. The title sent a shiver down his spine, The Unsolved Disappearances of Willow Creek University. He opened the book, his eyes quickly finding a familiar face staring back at him. The young woman from the library, her name printed beneath her picture, Eleanor Vance, a student who had vanished from the university decades earlier, her disappearance never solved. John spent the rest of the night devouring the book, piecing together Eleanor's story. She had been a brilliant student, passionate about history, just like him. Chapter 3, The Disappearing Roommate. Our final story is shrouded in mystery, a chilling tale of a vanished student and the eerie silence left in their wake. Mark, a sophomore living in a cramped dorm room, had always found his roommate David a little off. David was a loner, preferring the company of his textbooks and strange experiments to the social scene that consumed most college students. He would spend hours hunched over his desk, muttering to himself in hushed tones, surrounded by an arsenal of chemicals and gadgets that made Mark nervous. One particularly strange night, Mark stumbled back to his dorm room after a late-night study session. He flipped on the light, expecting to find David engrossed in one of his bizarre experiments. But the room was empty. David's side of the room was immaculate. No textbooks, no beakers bubbling with strange concoctions, no sign of his roommate at all. At first, Mark brushed it off. Maybe David had gone to crash with a friend for the night. But as days turned into weeks, and David's absence stretched on, a knot of worry began to twist in Mark's gut. He tried calling David, but his calls went straight to voicemail. He checked with all their mutual friends, but no one had seen or heard from him. David had vanished, leaving behind an unsettling void in the dorm room. Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. He started noticing strange things around the room. Faint chemical smells like something burning lingered in the air. He'd find strange symbols scrawled on scraps of paper, symbols that looked eerily like the ones he'd seen in David's textbooks. Symbols that sent a shiver down his spine. One evening, while searching for his missing headphones, Mark stumbled upon a hidden compartment under David's bed. Inside, he found a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with David's cramped handwriting. As Mark flipped through the journal, his blood ran cold. The journal detailed David's obsession with interdimensional travel, his belief that he could unlock the secrets to traversing time and space. The entries grew increasingly frantic, filled with cryptic equations and diagrams that made Mark's head spin. The final entry, scrawled in shaky handwriting, sent a chill down Mark's spine. "It's almost complete," it read. "Tonight I will finally break free from this reality." Mark slammed the journal shut, his heart pounding in his chest. He raced out of the dorm room, the journal clutched tightly in his hand. He knew he had to tell someone, to show them what he'd found. But who would believe him? He decided to go to the one person he thought might listen, his physics professor, Dr. Lewis. Dr. Lewis, a kind but eccentric man, was known for his open-mindedness and willingness to explore unconventional theories. Mark burst into Dr. Lewis's office, his words tumbling out in a rush. Dr. Lewis listened patiently, his brow furrowed as he examined the journal. When Mark finished, Dr. Lewis looked up, a grave expression on his face. "Mark," he said slowly, "I know this sounds unbelievable, but I think your roommate may have stumbled upon something truly dangerous." Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more spine-chilling content. Stay safe out there, and remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that are true. And if you ever find yourself alone, late at night in a creepy dorm room or a shadowy library, just remember, you're not alone.